WrestleMania 41 is happening right around the corner. It's happening this Sunday and Saturday, nights 1 and 2. And Triple H has been making the rounds in the media, doing a whole bunch of interviews, and it seems like he did some when he was in the UK when they were doing their tour there, and then he came back and did a series of interviews here in the States, and there was some interesting news, and we'll get into our first segment with an interview with Triple H talking about his career and his relationship with Vince McMahon, and he was comparing the way that he does creative decision making and how he manages wrestlers and people versus Vince McMahon. So, with Vince gone, Triple H is essentially the lead creative director in the company. He did appear on the High Performance podcast, and he talked about how he, sat under the learning tree of Vince McMahon. He actually used that terminology a number of times, because I was talking with Chris earlier about, I guess that slipped my mind the first time because I was listening to him in that first show, and then I was watching the other podcast he was doing, and he also mentioned the learning tree. Maybe he just likes that term. I don't know if he'd be that very, I don't know, crafty to do some kind of weird Easter egg or something about, a Chris Jericho appearance. But he talked about his, sitting on a learning tree with Vince McMahon, and this is basically what he said. When you learn, especially from mentors, you learn what to do and what not to do. There were things that bothered me about the way he did things, certain things with his personality. He would run things totally different than I would. And we've talked about that before. Even when I was running NXT, he would be like, why are you doing it like that? And then he said, because it worked for me. When asked to give an example, Triple H said he was much more controlling, especially as he got older, much more controlling. When I first came in, when we started DX, we were just doing our own thing. Nobody was scripting anything. We were doing our own thing. Most times we're coming back, and he was mad at us and screaming at us. We're going to get thrown off air, goddammit, don't do that again. And then we were just like, whatever, and we go do it again the following week. There was a point where that started to work, and we started to really get over, and it started to do big business, and ratings changed. Now, all of a sudden, we show up to TV one week, and they hand us a script. I said, what is this? And then the people said, it's what Vince wants you to say tonight. He said, what? He doesn't tell us what to say. And then they said he wants to start. Triple H said they'd go into his office. They'd ask, what is this? Vince said, it's a script. It's what I want you to say. And then they said, Sean and Triple H said, this is terrible. It's not funny. It's not us. And he was saying that he was much newer, and Sean was acting like the 90s Sean at the time. He said, we're sitting in the meeting. We read it a couple of times. We had the argument with him and said, that's what I want you guys to do. Just go do it. Sean crumpled up the piece of paper and said, I ain't saying any of this shit. Threw it at Vince, and then we walked out of the office. Triple H said, I was like, wow, we're getting fired. There were various points of times where he would become very controlling of things, very specific to how he wanted it to be. It's his prerogative. He's the boss. We would all talk about it and be like, it would be better if we did this. Even Pat Patterson would come to me and say, Vince wants to do this thing and it's so stupid. And Patterson would say, let's do this instead. Triple H would respond and say, Pat, I talked to him until I was blue in the face. You go talk to him. And of course, Triple H was in charge of NXT until he had that health scare with his heart in September 2021 and kind of forced him to take a step back from his role. And then Shawn Michaels was put in charge of creative at the time. And then Triple H would begin leading WWE creative in June of 2022 when McMahon left after allegations of some misconduct and hush money. And I don't think it is news to anybody that Vince McMahon is very controlling. I think it's interesting when it comes out of Triple H's mouth and how he kind of explains it, because he knows, like, he's not stupid. He lived it in his NXT era, and yeah, so I have some questions and I guess thoughts for you guys, and maybe you can help help flesh out some of these questions with your answers. How do you feel like Triple H's creative decision differs from Vince McMahon based on what we've seen since 2022? Chris, how about you?
I think there's a little bit more collaborative effort, I think, with talent and himself. Like, he still has a vision, but in that same interview, he was talking about CM Punk, how 10 years ago they were different and now they're different. And they were trying to collaborate, I guess, and CM Punk didn't like what direction it was like supposed to go. And then Triple H essentially said that, there's room for us to do something different. And he was like, you know what? I just have PTSD or whatever he said from like 10 years ago on like how it was kind of run. So it's definitely a just different environment. And even like CM Punk isn't used to that.
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point. That's a really good example that he brought up because, like you said, when he was having the conversation with CM Punk, I mean, he said it was there was really just bad communication, and Triple H at the time he was like this middleman in between Vince McMahon and then CM Punk. So he's dealing with all the, backlash between each other. And CM Punk did have, an attitude, and he probably thought he was right in certain regards. And I think he also thinks that he could have taken things a little differently in other respects. And like you said, CM Punk, when he was having this conversation in these past 2 years, and he was feeling a certain kind of way, he left and then came back to the call and explained that he was experiencing PTSD because he's not used to a certain way of things in WWE, and apologized. And he grew from that. And Triple H, I feel like, approaches that a little differently. Well, how about you, David? How do you feel like Triple H's creative direction differs from Vince's based on what we've seen so far since 2022?
I don't think that Vince was like kind of seen as someone they could like confide in. Like
Yeah.
I think most of these guys being from NXT from a time when Triple H was in charge helps them a lot in like getting their ideas out because they do have a bag of like what worked in NXT.
Mm-hmm.
And just like I'm sure that's left a way like open communication. Like Chris was saying, it does definitely seem a lot more collaborative.
Yeah. I mean, just think about all the stories that we hear from like when JR was on like commentary, just like Michael Cole's like whole demeanor shifted when Vince left. Like he just seems so much more looser and just more himself on commentary now. Like he's having more fun than he has, at least from perception. Like it felt like people were walking on eggshells, and especially the announcing team. I mean, who was talking about it? Renee Paquette was talking about like when she was in WWE and she was announcing, and I think she forgot to mention something about the pay-per-view. I think a certain detail about the match, and he's like yelling in her ear, talking about how she basically ruined the match because she didn't mention this one specific thing. So Vince McMahon was very. Triple H made a good point talking about how there's a lot of carrots and sticks. Vince was very much a stick person. Reading between the lines, he was pretty dominating, and there's a certain way of he was going about things in terms of creative control, and Triple H just said that he's more of a carrot person, and he would walk through the reasoning when he's telling wrestlers that this is why we're doing this. He's not yelling at them, he's not being upset with them, he actually walks them through and explains why it is, and he's still making a decision. He said there's a distinct difference. It's not like it's the what he said, the inmates running the asylum. It's not just guys walking over him just saying, oh, this is what I want to do, and he's just like, sure, whatever, throw his hands up and then just let them do whatever. He is making decisions. Like at the end of the day, he knows what he wants, but he explains it to them, like treats them like adults and tells them, this is what we're doing, this is why, and admits also when he's wrong. Even after explaining and saying why he did it, he also can admit when he's wrong. Now, do you feel like WWE's storytelling and character development has improved under Triple H?
I think so.
I think there's just more cohesion. I mean, like mid 2010s WWE, there was a lot of just like start stopping of storylines. And sometimes they would just like stop something completely and it didn't make sense, or they just dropped it for whatever reason. So there's a lot more just cohesiveness as far as the storylines are concerned now.
Yeah. What do you feel like has been the biggest creative risk you think Triple H has taken since he took over? And did it pay off?
I think Jey Uso might
Yep.
be his biggest creative risk. I think it's paying off.
Yeah, I would say like just like him putting the belt on people that seem in certain people's eyes as people that were undeserving, or it was just like a left field thing. Like I guess like Io Sky's a recent example too of just her having the belt right now. You know, beating Rhea Ripley in when was that, Australia or Germany? Where'd she get that belt?
Well, it
was
was
like
a
a
random
European
Monday.
tour.
It was not
It
too
was a
long
Euro-
ago.
Yeah, I mean it was this past month. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just stuff like that. I think he's just willing to try something or give somebody, the belt or the strap without like, going through the ringer and then just proving something and it's like undeniable or whatever. So I think he's more of a risk taker in that sense. And then, like he was kind of saying during the podcast, there's always tomorrow. If it goes wrong or if it's a shitty, SmackDown or a Raw, there's always tomorrow, he was saying. So, I mean, it's just his philosophy of and his approach that's obviously shining as far as like just trying something. So he's definitely more of a risk taker.
And I mean, I feel like, leading up to WrestleMania 40 and even leading up to now, he's had two major like money-making baby faces that have been faces for the longest time in The Rock and John Cena both turn heel. We had a Rock heel turn last year at WrestleMania 40 going into WrestleMania, and now we have a John Cena heel turn, a back-to-back like big babyface heel turn. Both, and I mean the final, but I'm sure The Rock had a lot of input, but I think Triple H also was involved in that heel turn, and I don't think Vince McMahon would ever turn John Cena heel, and I think that is a big creative risk for Triple H, and I feel like so far, I mean, for The Rock part, big payoff, because that was truly like must-watch television. The Rock was the most interesting he has been since like in 25 years, since 2003 as Hollywood Rock, I think. And now with John Cena, I mean, I think again, super interesting. I just wish it was. I wish it didn't last this short for his in the retirement year. I wish it expanded a little longer than that, and maybe it will. But he said he's going to retire in December, and we'll give it to him. But I'm going to enjoy this, short heel run unless, he retires as a bad guy, which would be kind of interesting too. But yeah, I think that's a really big creative risk that Triple H has taken, and I think it's paid off for both of them. Now, we talked about a little bit how Triple H learned both what to do and what not to do from Vince. What do you think were some of the key lessons he took to heart, and which ones do you think he left behind? And I kind of touched upon it a little bit with his approach, but can you think of anything else you thought maybe he took with him?
Wait, what was the question from Vince you're saying, or?
So Triple H said he learned both what to do and what not to do from Vince. So what do you think were some lessons that he took to heart from Vince, and which ones did he say, "Nah, I'm not doing that"?
Well, I'm guessing on some level it was just kind of sticking to your guns with what he felt was correct, but just his approach was different. So I imagine that specifically, and just kind of like seeing his vision, that kind of a thing. He used some analogy, describing Vince McMahon like climbing Mount Everest and then still looking for the taller mountain or something like that, or going down the Mount Everest and trying to find a bigger mountain or something like that. Whereas he he was saying that he can ravel in the wins in the moment rather than like looking for the next, high or whatever for the company or for himself. So,
yeah. Good points. David, do you have anything about like what he might have taken from Vince or what he definitely didn't take from Vince when he got into this position?
I think he just took everything that he got to sit on the sidelines for the last like decade and took everything that he didn't like, and because like it's very evident that he's just a fan like us, and I think yeah, and I think he took everything he didn't like and made it NXT, and then he's found his like great way to just connect both to make it to what it is right now.
I mean,
Yeah,
he made a point about like how the wrestling right now is different, and if he had it his way, he would prefer the wrestling that he grew up on. I guess 70s style wrestling, 80s style wrestling. But he said, the toothpaste is out of the tube or whatever the saying was, and that it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, some people are more acrobatic, more flippy than the slow armbar, headlock type of wrestling.
Well, was he not talking about like when he was wrestling in the 90s, like that style
of that's
wrestling?
Well, he said he prefers that, I think, or like him personally, as far as like the style of wrestling he likes.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, I think he said the toothpaste is out of the tube, and like there's just a zeitgeist of this style of wrestling, and I feel like it's just something that changes organically as new wrestlers come in, and then they get influenced by different styles, and then that becomes a norm. And I think it's just kind of like a natural thing. You can't really force something like that with your talent. So let's see now. How do you feel about the synergy between the brands of WWE and NXT right now? Shawn Michaels is running NXT. Triple H is handling the main roster. We have both members of DX basically running WWE. How do you feel about the synergy between the brands right now? Do you feel like there's a clear vision across all levels of WWE, or do you feel like maybe there's a disconnect somewhere? Or you think they're all firing on all cylinders?
I think they're both doing the best that they've done in a long time. I think NXT definitely went through a down period that they're not currently going through. They got a couple more guys on the singles side now. Girls are just as good as they were, 10, 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And would you, so I think we also had this conversation a little bit for the men in NXT. Do you feel like that has improved at all? Because I know we've talked a little bit about how the women's roster in NXT has been stacked, and they've had better programs overall, and the men have had a bit of a problem. Do you still think that's the case in April 2025?
I don't think so. I think their main title picture is good, and then like Ricky Saints just got the North American, so he'll keep that tied up, and he can handle his own in terms of building a mid card or upper mid card.
Yeah, I mean, I really think Ricky Saints as a talent for the men in NXT was a really big boost for them, and he is, and like I said before, he is star power, and I really do see it in his promos. I definitely think he needs more time to cook in NXT, but I do think that the WWE way of things is a little bit more up his alley versus how AEW handles things. But yeah, great. So I mean, we're kind of on this train about